Welcome to, we think it's week 6. I can never keep up with where we're at. I hardly know what day of the week it is, but we are here. And today we are talking about money in relationships. So there's a lot to unpack when it comes to money in relationships, but it's something that I am often asked about, and it's something that we are looking at different ways to tackle conflicts and things today. So, Gemma, if you want to kick off, like, what are your initial thoughts about money and relationships?
Well, I really love this topic for a few reasons. And this was actually a request from people that use the platform. So that was really good as well. It's something that I'm really interested in. And it's good. One, we love that people are reaching out and telling the Finito guys exactly what they want to be learning about. So that's awesome. But yeah, I love the topic for two reasons. This is something that comes up in most of my money coaching sessions with my friends. This is a massive issue for everybody, and it was a massive issue for me personally in my marriage. It's not why we're divorced, but we had to do a lot of work around this. So I've personally done a lot of work around it, and I love helping people do work around it. So yeah, I was really excited when Kimberly said that this is something that people have been requesting, because I think it's something that just impacts everybody. And I don't think there's many people that can say that they do this well. And I think even if you are doing it well, you still have to consciously be making an effort to do it well. It's not really something that just works without you working on it. Would you agree?
Yeah, but I don't necessarily even think there is a right or wrong way to go about this. It's what is right or wrong for you. And that may change as well throughout a relationship. Like early on, I would say the majority of people would have separate finances. Like there's no issue with that. But for a lot of people, it's like, well, when do we join finances? You know, if we get engaged, do we join finances then? If we move in together, do we join finances then? Or do we need to wait until marriage? Or, you know, what does that look like? And it is going to be different for everyone.
And it will evolve. It evolves and changes throughout your whole relationship.
And what was your experience? So, like, when did you guys initially join finances? What did that look like?
So we got together quite young. So I was like, like 18, 20 kind of thing. And we were already living together, so we were already like splitting bills and that kind of stuff. But because I was in banking, I just naturally managed the money, and we were together nearly 20 years, and it really just fell on my shoulders. But I'd say most people that I speak to, and it was my experience as well, usually around moving in together. But one thing that I talk to people a lot about now is that you can have joint goals, you can have joint expenses, you can live together and still have separate money. Especially the big one is you can have separate goals. You could be saving for a house with somebody or saving for a holiday, and you have the same savings goal that you're contributing, you're doing this, you've got all of the power that you're working together, but you have separate bank accounts or you have separate other money. Like you don't actually need to combine all your aspects of finances. I find that most people do, and I did, but in my next marriage, if there's ever one, or next partnership, if there's ever one, I won't be doing that again.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. And there's really 3 options, isn't there? There's completely separate, completely joint, or some separate, some joint. So in my marriage, we are completely joint. We don't have separate accounts. So that started, it was kind of all happened in the same year that we built a house and we got married. So those 2 events was when we just pulled everything and got rid of the separate accounts. And that's worked really well for us over the last 10 years. And I don't see any change to that moving forward. But I have a lot of clients who have the other 2 options of either completely separate or some separate and some joint. And I saw a really interesting, I wouldn't call it a statistic, but a study that was done that actually suggested that those who join finances, not necessarily all, you can still have separate accounts, but those who join finances to some degree actually have better financial outcomes, which I found really interesting. I'm sure there would be another study out there that would suggest the opposite, that those who have separate finances have better financial outcomes, and it's really going to depend on the relationship. But I found that really interesting.
That is really interesting. That actually, see, when you were saying that, I was like, oh, yeah, it probably goes both ways. So there'd be people that could be quite successful keeping finances separate as well. But that is interesting. But where do you think the starting point is when you're considering, or what would you say is the main thing that you need to do if you're considering combining finances with somebody?
One word: communicate. As simple as that. It's about, like, if you're in a long-term relationship with someone, I know money is quite a taboo topic for a lot of people, but it should be something that you can openly communicate about. And if you can't, or you don't know how to navigate that, that's when you can seek a little bit of guidance. Like, you can go and see a financial coach and have a one-off session to say, well, we have separate bank accounts now. How would you suggest we go about combining things? What would that look like? And we can kind of just nut it out together, because there is no, I can't sit here and say, okay, step 1 is you do this, step 2 is this.
Yeah. I find that a lot of the money coaching sessions with couples end up like a counseling session as well, because it's trying to get them on the same page. But I'd say the most important thing, I think, is to understand, like love languages, right? You try to understand your partner's love language or whatever. There's like a money language as well, and there's money stories and beliefs. But you need to understand that the way somebody else acts about money, feels about money, and how they manage their money is ingrained in them from their childhood, way before you met them. And that's not something that can change overnight. So you need to understand why they are the way that they are around money, and why you are the way you are around money, and you're not going to change each other. So you need to work together to make it work, because money causes so much conflict. It creates feelings of guilt and shame and fear and all of these things. So combining money is a massive trigger for people, and they don't realize, and they just expect, well, why isn't this working? And it's because there's years and years of issues that are making that person act the way that they are about money. So unless you understand that, think of it like understanding their love language, it's not going to work. So you need to understand that. So you need to communicate, compromise, and have compassion for why they are the way that they are.
Yeah. And coming back to that comment around those who have joint finances have better financial outcomes, I would say, and this is just my personal opinion, not necessarily the study, but that revolves around having the communication and talking about common goals and working towards common goals. And I see that a lot in client meetings, that often, if you're on different pages, if you're both trying to achieve 2 different things, that's when conflict often arises. How would you suggest someone, if they're sensing a bit of conflict, maybe it's very minor, like very subtle, or maybe it's like full-blown arguments, how would you suggest someone approaches that conflict?
Okay, that's a really good one, and it will totally depend on the person's personality, but also the relationship that you have. Like, are you open to talking about things? How do you handle other conflicts, and what's successful and what's working and what doesn't work? So if it was really, really bad, I think you should see somebody like a money coach, for example, or a psychologist or something, because there's some problems there with your communication. But if you have a good relationship in other areas that you can bring stuff up, I think just bringing it up when it's not in the conflict, so not in the heat of the argument. It's not the time to, if you're having a fight about money or you're stressed about bills and stuff, now is not the time to bring up, hey, let's get our money shit sorted together and really nut out what the issue is. It's when you're in a really calm, really good headspace, you're feeling like you can approach the conversation. And I would always ask them if they're feeling up to having that conversation. Because, if you've had like a really busy day, you might be in your head and stuff, and then someone calls you and they just start venting. And I saw like there's a healthy thing to do, and it's like, hey, do you have the headspace to talk to me or to listen to my problem, or that kind of stuff. So I think really making sure that they're in the headspace. It can't always just be on your time. You need to understand that, is that a good time that you're both going to be calm and be able to have the conversation about it. So timing, like if you went to your boss and said, I want a pay rise, just walk in their office and like you prepare for it, you make sure it's good time, you set time, like it's so important. Don't just spring it on them. But timing is everything, and it's not in the heat of a moment. But the issue is that people only think about the problems in the heat of the moment kind of thing, and then they think that's the time to solve them. But it's more about, I think, taking a bit of time, saying you want to talk about this, and hey, can we talk about it on the weekend maybe? And then both of you can have some time to think about what you're going to talk about.
And tying in with the timing, I think the language that we use as well. So this doesn't just apply to money, but any kind of conflict, using I statements. So instead of saying, you did this, you did that, and being, accusing someone of something, say, I feel like, because no one can say that that's not the way you feel. They can't say you don't feel that way, because how you feel is how you feel. So I feel like we are behind on our bills, or I feel like we're wasting a lot of money. And then they can share their opinion, and you can kind of go from there. And how that conversation goes will depend on so many different factors. But I think the way you approach these conversations, the language that you use, is just as important, if not more important, than the actual problem and the solution itself. And to also offer solutions. A bit like when you go to a boss, like, you don't want to go to a boss just with problems. They want you to come with solutions. So the same thing there, like, have a few different ideas. So if you have joint finances, but there's some kind of conflict there, as a solution that you could offer, you could say, well, how about we maybe direct our pays into separate accounts for a while and contribute to a joint account. And there's lots of variations of what that might look like, but to have ideas and to have solutions rather than just coming to your partner with the problem, because it's very hard to ease without some kind of offering the solution.
Yeah, and I think being open to flexibility and being open to trying different things is important. And you're so right. Like, you can't blame the other person, and you need to think of this like any other problem. You're a couple, you're a team. So address it as if it's you guys against the problem. It's not you against each other. Yeah, it's just so important how you frame it. But you could even, if you don't know how to bring it up, even you could be like, hey, I listened to these amazing chicks, Gemma and Lexi, and they were talking about, or you could be like, oh, hey, I saw in the paper and it was talking about this, or oh, my friend was saying about her husband. And you could make up anything, right, and then lead into that conversation. So that could be like your icebreaker. I read people who are managing their money like this. How do you think we're going with our money? I feel like, so just, yeah.
I think that when there are two members of a couple who earn similar or the same income, joining finances can be a lot simpler than if one member of the couple is earning significantly more than the other. There's, again, lots of different ways that we can navigate that. There is a lot of suggestion out there in, even the media, that where you have, like, let's say one person brings in 60% of the income and the other person brings in 40%, rather than splitting bills 50-50, we do a 60-40 split.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that though. Like, so if you think of like a rental, for example, or a home loan payment, and you keep most of your finances separate. So I have clients like this that have come to me, and they are on significantly different incomes. They're in a second marriage. They're not going to share finances. They split everything 50-50. But this person earns over 100,000 and the other person earns 30,000, and they're trying to keep up with the lifestyle. And I just said to them, this is not working. It's causing a massive conflict in your relationship. Why don't you do the percentage split so that you're both at the same disadvantage? It's either, whatever percent of your pay or percent of your pay. 50-50 doesn't work in that situation. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the percentage split based on what your incomes are.
And I think that there are certainly cases where that is the optimal solution, but I also see the downside of that setup. And I guess the alternative to that kind of setup is to just go all in, like all money is pooled. And I obviously have a lot of experience with this because this is what I do personally, where all money is pooled and it's just our money. Because there are other things in life as well, whereby, one person might be doing 60% of the housework, or maybe more than that. Maybe they're doing 90%. And so that reduces their ability to perhaps earn an income. And so they're not, that's unpaid work at home.
That the person that feels unpaid, they're enabling that other person to go and earn that income and doing that. That's a very important job, to be the enabler in a household. And that just because it's unpaid work doesn't mean that it doesn't contribute to the other person's ability to earn income and everything else.
Yeah. And I think, as a bit of a summary of all of this, if what you are doing right now is working, keep doing it. If it's not working, if there is conflict, if there is arguments, then try alternatives. And the first thing that you try might not work either. You might need to try something else. And if you're not really sure what to try, when you engage with, say, a financial coach who can give you some different options and give you a different perspective. So sometimes it's good to have that unbiased third party offer ideas, because it might be what you are actually thinking and what you're trying to communicate to your partner. But like anything, it's different when someone else says, like, if I give my husband an idea, he's like, nah, not a good idea. But if someone else says the exact same thing, he thinks, yeah, that's a great idea. So sometimes having that third party can work that way as well.
Yeah. So there's a couple of other points that I was thinking, and I'm racking my brain last night trying to think of this saying that I absolutely love, and I'm going to stuff it up. But it was pretty much, it's like you can delegate the tasks, but you're not the understanding, right? So if you are sharing money and it's all pooled or whatever, generally in a household, one person will take the reins with the finances. And that is totally fine. You don't have to both be the bill payers and the something. If somebody's that strength and they're going to manage the money, awesome. But you cannot not understand. You need to make the joint decisions, and you need to know what your finances are and why you do things that you do, like why things are set up that way and how they're set up. You don't have to be in it every day doing the day-to-day stuff, but you can't. So you can delegate the tasks. Somebody else can do it for you, but they can't understand it for you. And when you don't understand it and don't know what's going on, that's when you lose your financial power and your confidence around money, and it causes massive issues down the track.
I had that exact conversation with actually two couples recently, whereby one person was that, CFO of the household, and they were really feeling the pressure of that. And so it wasn't that they actually wanted their partner to take on any of the actual task work, but they wanted them to be aware of what was going on, because they were conscious of them making financial decisions without actually really understanding the position that they were in, which was then causing the person that was that CFO a lot of stress. So the solution in those particular scenarios was that we had either a monthly, bi-monthly, every second month, or quarterly check-in, whereby the second person, the non-CFO, doesn't really do anything with money during the year, apart from 1 hour every quarter, whereby the three of us together and we go through everything. And so it's not a big time burden, and it's not necessarily that they're doing anything, but that CFO feels a huge weight off their shoulders, that they're not carrying it all by themselves anymore.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I felt in my marriage when I managed the finances. It's so much pressure. One, because I'm a financial advisor, I have so much pressure, I put it on myself to make sure that our finances are okay, because this is my job, right? If I stuff this up and we're not okay, then I'm not very good at my job. So it's a massive responsibility, but also because he didn't understand and he didn't want to understand. And so I was always like, what if I do something that puts us in a bad position? Like I would decide, oh, we might sell this investment property or something. And I just wanted it to be joint, so it wasn't all on my shoulders if it went badly as well. Like it's so much pressure. And like we had to do lots of work around that for years to kind of make me, one, stop putting the pressure on myself, but just to get that like mental load like off your shoulders.
Yeah, I actually feel the exact same about meal planning and organizing dinner. That tends to fall on me, just the dynamics of our family and work locations and things. And I am happy to organize it, but I hate making the decision. The decision is the worst. So it's the same thing about money. Yeah. Two more things that I really want to make sure that we cover off on before we finish today. One is, like, we're talking about conflict and the bad side of, managing money together. There's also different things to talk about with joining finances. So I've had this conversation with a few people recently, whereby one person has been on maternity leave for an extended period, and they've been perhaps coping really well on that one income. And then they go back to work and they've got two incomes again. And so that changes things again on how to navigate finances. And something that I've seen done really well, and that I love to talk about because it's a really powerful way to manage money, is that you continue to live off that one income and you use that second income where possible to fund any of your bigger joint goals or your, accelerate your debt repayment on your mortgage, and basically keep assuming that that money's not there. You put that towards those bigger things. So, there's the doom and gloom of joining finances, but it can keep you very much accountable and on task and establish kind of restrictions that don't feel restrictive. So yeah, there's lots to talk about there. Anything you want to add to that before I move over to the other thing?
I think that's absolutely right. Like combining finances, it can get you into a different level of assets, and it gives you more purchasing power, more borrowing power, all these different things. But I think one great thing about combining finances is if you know each other's strengths and weaknesses, you can use them to your advantage, right? So take your strengths and weaknesses and work together as a team. You don't have to change the other person. But for example, if somebody's a spender, right, it's always seen as a negative. But people that are spenders generally are better with investing because they can let go of money easier. So turn that weakness of being a spender into, hey, maybe we're going to get faster we're going to jump into investing quicker because you're already in the mindset that you can part with money easier. So let's help, turn that negative into a positive. So I think that you can work together and you don't need to change somebody. You can work and use your strengths and weaknesses.
When I met my husband, Ben, he would spend this much and I'd spend this much. And now we're more like this. I've learned to spend more on things that I was more, frugal around. And he naturally spends less because I've influenced him and he's influenced me, and it's a really happy medium for us. But, you might not always have that if you're both spending up here or you're both spending down here and you don't have that dynamic. The last thing that I wanted to make sure that we covered off on today, because it is very, very important, is binding financial agreements, BFAs. Some people might recognize them as, they might associate the name of prenup.
Well, I have a lot of experience in this as being recently separated. So I just had to do one of those, and I will be doing one in any future relationships. But yeah, I'm a really, really big fan of them. Always have been as a financial advisor for clients as well. But yeah, they have a really negative, it's like a negative association. Like it's prenup, like you have no trust. You're like thinking of the marriage or the relationship failing before it starts. Like they just get such a bad rap. But I do really think that they're a solid part of strategy. And if we look at the stats around divorces and separations, it's very, very common. So should be a common thing as well. But yeah, that people should consider them. But it depends on your relationship, right? So for example, my marriage, we were both very young. We came into it with nothing. We grew it all together. So there might not be a reason for you to have one, or there might be. So if it's a second relationship, for example, and you can do them retrospect, which I didn't realize, you can do them at any time in your relationship. But a big misconception in Australia is that, I myth busted this the other day, is that if you're together with somebody for 6 months, then your pooled assets and everything comes into play. And it's not. It's actually 2 years, unless you've had a significant financial contribution to each other's lives.
I may not be correct, but I believe it's actually different in every state. Every state has their own rules. Yeah. We can maybe see if we can pick that out and we can share it on the platform.
Yeah, let's look that up, because I was doing some research about it and I was sure that I was really surprised because everyone seems to think it's that 6 month, and it was 2 years. But yeah, so what do you think about them? Again, I think it just depends on the relationship and how you manage things. But yeah, I'm very pro them.
Yeah. And very similar to you, when we kind of came into our relationship, we came in with equal assets, just I guess out of luck, and have built everything together. So I do, though, speak to a lot of clients who are, in their 30s, and they might be entering second relationships, and they do have disparity between what they're entering the relationship with. And so I do talk to and refer people to, so you'll see a family lawyer for a binding financial agreement. They are quite costly. You'd be looking at, around about $5,000. But at the same time, that may avoid legal fees of tens of thousands of dollars down the track, depending on how the situation plays out. And I think it's not that you think that you will break up, but you just don't know what the future holds. And I think going into that kind of thing, when things are amicable and all the rest of it makes that conversation a lot simpler. But maybe we can even, if there's some interest, maybe people can let us know via the platform to have a bit of a guest speaker one week, to have a family lawyer share some stories.
So interesting. Yeah, there's actually, and like you could totally get into it about separating finances and stuff as well when relationships don't work out, because there's just so much to that. Like, people automatically think you grab a lawyer and you just start fighting. You know, you can get a mediator, you can do it all yourself. You know, you might be on really good terms, but if you've got that document, that structure, and you know going into things, it just is going to make life so much easier. But it depends where you are in your relationship. As we said, like, if you're building everything together, then it's probably not necessary. But if you're coming from it, you're meeting later in life, you've got significant disparity in assets. Yeah, while everything's going well, you can't imagine that you'll ever be in that position. But what are the stats? Like, they're over 50% or something now. So protecting yourself and just making that easier on yourself down the track. An investment of $5,000, like, I think mine was a bit over $4,000. So $4,000 to $5,000, if you've got significant assets, it's just so important to do.
And I often get referrals from family lawyers whereby they have had a client who has just gone through a separation, but they haven't been the CFO of their household, and they haven't been, you know, we were talking about be aware of what's going on with finances, even if you don't manage it. They haven't done that. And so they've walked away with their share of the property pool, and they just don't really know where to start, because they haven't done anything with money for 20 odd years. And so sometimes having a couple of meetings with a financial coach will enable you to get really clear on what your situation is, where you want to go, and how you're going to get there.
Yeah, so to wrap it up, I think the key thing here is you need to understand your relationship. We can't say this is the way to do it, because depending on how you communicate and what your relationship style is and where you're at in your relationship journey is going to change how you manage your money, how you raise conflicts, how you deal with the conflicts. But the most important thing is communication and compromise, and understanding that their money beliefs and values are going to be different to yours, but you can work together. You can have separate goals, you can have joint goals, and you can work as a team. But what your friends are doing or what other people are doing isn't necessarily going to be how. Yeah, exactly. And there's like the traditional like model for how families look and feel these days is completely out the window. So find what works for you and keep trying new things until you find what works and you're both 100% over it. But yeah, and that saying that I just love about, yes, somebody can do it for you, but you need to understand. You need to keep your financial control. And as you said, if that's a meeting once a fortnight and that makes you feel in control and it helps take the burden off your partner that's managing it all, then that's what you've got to do.
And to utilize as well any support services. So we've spoken about financial coaching, but then there's another aspect to that if there are other triggers in there, such as gambling. So there are lots of different support services out there, but the thing is, you just have to reach out. That brings us to the end of our session today. Next week, I don't know what we're talking about, but we will be here, same time, same place.
Yes, we definitely will. And if there's any topics that people want, please get in touch with the Finito guys, make a comment or whatever, because this one just came up the last couple of days because it was requested. But we will get a family lawyer on for sure, because this is such a big topic. Yeah, and we can get a guest speaker on. That'd be great.
Thanks, Gemma. See you next week.
Yeah. Bye.